Greetings in the best of salutations. I have said that society is under a social reconstruction, whereas our feelings are becoming desensitized, our thoughts demoralized, our attitude dehumanized, our communication devitalized. The goal of happiness, which is to live in agreement with nature. Happiness depends on being self-sufficient and a master of mental attitude. Self-sufficiency is achieved by living a life of virtue. The road to virtue is to free oneself from any influences, wealth, fame, power which have no value in nature. Suffering is caused by false judgments of value, which cause negative emotions and vicious character. The goal of happiness. We all want to live a decent, honest, respectable life. As happiness is the pursuit Is it the aim? Is it the goal? As we look at some words that was shared among a group of people who says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Freedom of press, before that, freedom of religion. The full freedoms, Just the freedom to express yourself. The word free itself and the word dome is a capital, or the mind that which rules, because that which occupies the mind conditions the mind. That's just the nature of the mind. The mind at its best is to be productive, The brain cells is constructed to think correctly. If we look at this universe, how it is brought together and brought about, it is brought about in a way to teach us something of the importance of living in harmony, It also teaches us before anything manifests itself, it must first have order. It says the goal of happiness, and I know I stated earlier if it is the goal. Some say that which one is in pursuit of is wealth. But this doctrine states that the goal of happiness, which is to live in agreement with the nature of happiness, it depends on being self-sufficient and a master of mental attitude. Self-sufficiency is achieved by living a life of virtue. The road to virtue is to free oneself from any influences. That includes wealth, Yes, this includes wealth. Some will say that that these were self-indulgent men of pleasure, men of luxury. So it sounds very hypocritical. Maybe their pleasure and their responsibility was it for themselves to set an example for a nation, There is something about being very narcissistic lovers of self, What's wrong with loving yourself? But can we go to a point that we become so extreme, and in that extremism there is a sense of obsession? And when there is a sense of obsession, one becomes very aggressive with the obsession. Like guided men and misguided missiles, obsessed with war, obsessed with greed, obsessed with power, and has no discipline, no restraint, no mental control. If one has no mental control, then therefore he or she becomes mentally incapacitated. When one is mentally incapacitated, he or she is unable to reason. He or she is unable to grasp concepts and grasp terms, and he or she is unable to listen to another person's point of view. Therefore, he or she is very delusional, disoriented, and needs help. There was a writer, songwriter that says that the world is run by psychopaths. But the world represents a reality, and This is the reality that they have accepted, and this is the reality that they want to give to the world. And therefore they influence others and say, this is your reality, and this is the means and the matter and the way in which you pursue your happiness. Through means of self-indulgence. It's likened unto humans who naturally come together and they gravitate to one another, and they love the pleasure, but they don't like the responsibility that comes with the pleasure. So that be the case we see in a society where there is no not too much commitment anymore when it comes to being married and male and female. And then you don't even want to be responsible with even one's own insanity and the way one thinks in a unnatural sense. And what I mean is that is unnatural. I mean in the means, in the manner, in a way in which one has evolved based upon how he or she has been orientated in this natural realm of our existence. And doing so, we tend to think that to hurt, harm, to maim, to insult, and disrespect one another, we seem to think that is natural, and that is not natural at all. But then again, when we think about that which is natural, then people try to distinguish what is natural and that which is nature. And nature is associated with that which is nurturing, and nurturing is that which is has been cultivated, Then again, when there is cultivation, there must be a seed, and the seed must be planted, and it must be planted in the ground, and the ground either can become hard or fertile, and it produces a crop. And I've learned that every thought begins with a seed. It goes back again to thought, to the thinking. Then again, it also is associated of that which is to be cultivated. Once again, the goal of happiness, which is to live in agreement with nature. Happiness depends on being self-sufficient and a master of mental attitude. He or she who becomes a master of anything must become proficient in it. So one must become a master of his or her circumstances, because circumstances makes us other than ourselves. To reach outside of yourselves is the beginning of deception. I've learned we're born in a condition, placed in a situation, surrounded by circumstances that's continued upon some previous activity that has been taking place in pursuit of happiness. Self-sufficiency is achieved by living a life of virtue. The road to virtue is to free oneself from any influences. We have to look at this too when it comes to two approaches. The Afrocentric versus the non-Afrocentric approach. This is based on possibly anthropology, how one interprets their reality. And I know that when we're living in a people being up um, uprooted and brought to another geographical location. That we're not the same people. But yet, then again, how can you accept the tree without accepting the roots from the tree? When you go beyond race, class, gender, religion, politics, economics, and religion, you realize that when you're talking about a root, you're talking about that which has been rooted in you. And we talk about one's worldview, perception becomes your perspective. Anyone's limited perception, he or she tends to think that he knows it all, but no one has a monopoly on intelligence. But as I try to approach things, I try to approach it universally, holistic, conscientious, and universal, as well as comprehensive. This worldview, this reality, Remember I said, you must go beyond race, class, gender, religion, economics, politics, and education. If I forgot that as well. The worldview, based on anthropology and climate in which one grow up in, and that can be the environment. Remember, whatever's going on in your mind, whatever you're perceiving, whatever is coming in, it's going to manifest itself. It's going to come out. And because it's been nurtured, it's been cultivated. Excuse me. But yet but when you're in the wilderness represents that which has been unrefined, uncultivated, and untamed. And remember, this in my book, Overcoming Being Mentally Enslaved, Encaged, and Enraged, A Personal Quest, Finding Resolve into Complete Civility. Page 31, it talks about the goal of happiness, which is to live in agreement with nature. Happiness depends on being self-sufficient and a master of mental attitude. Self-sufficiency is achieved by living a life of virtue. The road to virtue is to free oneself from any influences. Yes. So, let's look at this again when we're talking about worldview, the Afrocentric approach, and in the non-Afrocentric approach. From the window of our eyes, of how we see things, and our limited perception. Dealing with this psychosocial dislocation and emotional displacement. And it comes to the pursuit of happiness. The African worldview, the European worldview. We know the word Euro comes from the word Ethiopia, which is a Phoenician prince. African associated with Africanus. Just names. See, humans are more concerned with the end product. I think one, in order to be very stable in life, one must focus on the progress, the process of the progress, rather than the rather than perfection. Focus on the progress of the process. Because progress can be measured by what you do with what you have, and what you have done with what you have. The African worldview, the European worldview. The African worldview, basic structure. Structure is a foundation. Structure, how we structure and organize our thinking, our thoughts, and as it becomes to how we structure our lives and how we interact with one another on a daily basis. Extended structure, a nuclear structure. African worldview, an extended structure, and a nuclear structure. So now there are things that are said in the society where it's called social distancing. However, that is defined and how it is in the intentions and meaning behind it. I find out too in this wise in interacting and observing people that who gets the worst of this, whatever it is that transpires in any society, not any society, but because who gets the worst? If you have been treated the worst, and you wind up in you knowing that, and you don't want others to get treated that way. Somehow or another, there are some little intangibles that we may not see and put our hand on, that we become enablers to other people because we don't want to get treated that way. But yet at the same time it takes on a hypocritical nature, because you don't want that person to get treated a certain way, and you will help him. You think that you're helping them, but you wind up serving as an enabler. But it's to it makes you feel good to help that individual. For example, if one has been, abused and misused, he or she could have experienced, maybe become a victim of vile behavior, and one could have been a user, been using and taking drugs or what have you. I know this low level stuff, but you can use a low level and reference a higher point, make a higher point. Is that so now you don't participate, you are not being abused anymore by the activity, but yet you abuse others with the activity that you was abused with. And that's an enabler, and that's hypocritical, because that means that that those have been treated the worst, they get the worst, and then they become the worst, because he or she who imitates a people become worse than them. Yes. And then people become very happy living in that content, living in that misery. And because remember, we're dealing with the psychosocial dislocation and the mental displacement that has influenced the minds of people. Because if the one who has the influence over you, or what have you, then you take on that's disease, because that becomes somewhat as a means of justifying one's behavior. Yes, it becomes a means of justifying one's behavior. I'm just trying to make myself as clear as I can. But the extended structure, and then think about it now, because talking about still pursuing happiness, but it's mental control without any influence or wealth or fame. You know what I'm saying? So, but then African worldview, this is the tricky part, is that we start to extend this thinking, this sickness, whereas the European worldview, it's nuclear, it's right there within. Now, there's also says this is that if there is inter-conflict and one with another, then you have to create someone else to kill. If not, you'll wind up killing yourself. So, in that nuclear structure, they with this psychosocial mental psychosocial dislocation and emotional displacement, and in pursuit of that which makes a person happy, but without without influences. It's just a natural thing to live in harmony as opposed to being in disharmony. Is that this disharmony, and as people who have been mistreated and abused, they just extend it. They just carry on the same hypocritical nature, the same pursuit, because someone had told you this is what makes you happy, and you have decided for yourself, okay, yes, this what makes me happy. This what makes me happy. Hey, you can best measure a thing by what you do with it, and the best thing that has been given to humans is his faculties. His ability to reason, his ability to think. So then we deal with the basic nature. We deal with the basic structure, and we've seen that there is a structure that is based on putting people at odds with one another and extending that worldwide. There's a problem, because that's one's worldview. So the basic nature, African worldview, is extended kinship and relations, horizontal, vertical relations, children, elders, ancestors, kinship relations. In the European worldview, immediate blood relatives. It's like that which is immediate, that which is right there. I need it now. And blood represents society. Horizontal over vertical. Spread it. It's just their thinking. The attitude is being spread. And how one relate one with another. And one's pursuit of happiness. And to become a master of it, because he or she becomes proficient. Contemporary members, adults and children. There is saying by organization that there is no permanent enemies, no permanent friends, only permanent interests. But you cannot sacrifice truth for any interest. Interest is to be sacrificed only for truth. Truth is the cause that impacts the results of one's reality. So the basic themes, Afrocentric approach and non-Afrocentric approach. Afro-African worldview and European worldview. Basic themes: collectivism, spiritualism, community, complementary, that's respect, interdependence, cooperation, group commitment, reciprocity, shared responsibility, accountability to group, community, and race. A shared responsibility. So, if your shared responsibility has been manipulated and justified and by being contaminated by outside influence, so the responsibility that we share is to continue to perpetuate and promote and justify taking advantage of one another when you have been taken advantage, and now you're taking advantage of one another by continuing participating in activity that is very disruptive and disturbing. So that's a responsibility that you have shared, or have we been irresponsible in our group commitment, or we have been committed to a group that doesn't have our best interests at heart, or have we been committed to a thinking, a philosophy that has contaminated our thinking, and therefore we becomes irresponsible for ourselves, or more responsible to others, such as at times when some elders used to raise other people's children, and then therefore neglect their own children. The past is just a reference point, is not a place of residence. But everything is being played out. It's just being played out. That's all. Being played out. So yeah. So we want to keep on looking at this thing here. European worldview, individualism. Individual really is the sum total of the whole. Materialism. Remember we stated earlier that materialism don't even play a part in happiness. Separateness, independence, power, dominance. Romantic love, tall, dark, handsome. This fantasy, how it has influence over the minds of a basic worldview of a people who wants to find legitimacy and acceptance in a culture, in a society, even if it's destructive. They don't care. So, pleasure, sex, accountability to self, immediate family. We see how it's playing out. Basic functions: African worldview, European worldview, procreation, group survival, collective identity, self-definition, child rearing, socialization. I want to be clear again on this too. Remember, all these things could also be in the reverse now. The nuclear structure, the basic structure, the basic nature, the basic theme, the basic function. When we come to the basic function part, we see that for the most part, it could be in the reverse. It could be in the reverse. That if you have a responsibility with something that is in your hand, and you fumble or drop the ball, someone else would take up that responsibility, and then they will claim it as their own, and then they will act it out. And if we look at some of the musical thing, how some people come in and they could do the thing better than the one who has maybe created and started it. They can do it better than them, and then therefore they become accepted. So they take what you have created or established, and they can do it better than you. Yes, they know how to cooperate better than you. They know how to share responsibility better than you. Because if you misappropriate and misuse and abuse your time, your energy, your nature, and your effort, and someone gives you something and you don't use it, the passage, when one didn't plant that which he gave him or her, didn't invest it, and then it was taken from him. It was taken from him. Yes. So, procreation, basic function, procreation, group survival, collective identity, self-definition, child rearing, socialization. This is an African worldview. European worldview, protection, security, defense, individual identity. Think about that. When it deals with, at one time I know when I came up, we used to drive in cars as a family, and of course marriage is it's important. Two heads of the household, and then like when the television and we all sat in the common room, we watched it together. We sat in the bed, we watched shows together. Now that's not the case, so things change. We say that's justifiable. I mean, these are more modern times, but I mean, it says here about materialism when it comes to happiness. Materialism doesn't influence you. It doesn't change you. It doesn't change you. I'm talking about as far as the basic structure, the basic nature, the basic theme, and the basic function. Nah. So yes. And then we deal with the objectives. The objectives. Strong community. And remember, things could be done in reverse now. That people, the European worldview, is that communities are strong. Communities are stronger. But he or she who controls the projection can project anything that they want to project. You know what I'm saying? So it's about the projection. Strong community objectives, African worldview, clan, race, community. This is the evolutionary process until becoming the natural ability to becoming unto completion. As a brother would say, a continental people. Community, organization, group, race. For me, race is just something that is conceptual, is not factual, but for the sake of communication. Genetic survival, oneness, harmony with nature. This is key here. Genetic survival, oneness, harmony with nature. The African versus the non-Afrocentric models of African family in America. The Afrocentric approach is the issue. And the issue is character resolve, and character is the outgrowth of one's humanity. Culture hegemony. When culture becomes destructive, you have to take a very serious look at the culture, because it's dynamic. It changes. So we are somewhat of a different people. We are evolved. We are evolving. Yes. Learning new nuances. But you can't accept the tree without accepting the roots from the tree. Roots, the grounding. The non-Afrocentric approach. Yes. The issue is character resolve, culture hegemony. This is the humanity I'm going to give to the world, because people are only responding to the extent of the injury that has been done to his or her humanity. Worldview foundation, African worldview, European worldview. Basic structure, African worldview, extended structure, community, clan, race. European worldview, nuclear structure. I'm just going over it again. The basic nature, African worldview. Extended kinship relations, horizontal, vertical relations, children, elders, ancestors, kinship relations. Now I know when you took a vertical and horizontal, horizontal and vertical, your mind goes, four corners, okay? And another thing, that's what I'm just not going to share religiously. Basic nature, European worldview. Immediate blood relatives, horizontal over vertical relations, contemporary members, adults and children. This comes to mind how Booker T. Washington, before I proceed on, how he said, I wanted to cement cement the cooperation of the people of black and white. We know once again that's something that someone come up with that is conceptual, not factual. But he wanted to cement that we merge to come together. You know what I'm saying? That we learn to really, I'm talking about coexist with one another, but not in a way that is covered up with certain niceties, that the trickery, that your mentality that you have, that your intentions, don't think that your intentions and your integrity is not going to be questioned. Yes. And don't do it so that many people who consider to be black in America, politicians, are locked in symbolism of power, that you sell the people short. Because if there is still so much crime, so much corruption, so much drugs in the community, so much foul behavior, so much animosity, so much hatred, so much anger, so much poverty, so much frustration, then it's a public health crisis. And if it's a public health crisis, then we have to deal with those who create the laws and policies driven by interests. We have to look to what we call so-called leadership, community, government, education, culture, and business. How do you change a society with people? By how you behave. Don't sell the people cheap. Don't deceive the people. And if a people have been programmed by way of deception for the majority of their lives, it is difficult for them to receive and hear the truth. Because if a rabbit gets there before the turtle got a hell of a job to do when it comes to telling people the truth. And when you talk about mainstream society, the media, press, and television, so forth and so on, you can constantly being bombarded with a lot of foolishness. And then you have people who will come and act out their foolishness, and then their immediate situation is solved, while the rest of the people are left to fend for themselves. So if there is an emerging in the coexisting and co-oping with one another, in that merging, it becomes diluted. And I'm talking about what becomes diluted. I mean the dilution of understanding the Afrocentric versus the non-Afrocentric models of the African family in America. Because a family is about, in the manner and way in which we communicate our humanity when it comes to our perception, when it comes to one's worldview. And that's based on anthropology, climatic, the environment, that which how people interpret their reality. Yes. So, and when people naturally resist that, and when they naturally resist that, they act out in a manner, and some try to dealing with this, not only this pursuit of happiness, but this psychosocial dislocation and emotional displacement, and they will, look for things outside of themselves, such as drugs, or alcohol, or what have you. They would do that, and then they would justify that I've lived my life and I did what now I can do what I want to do. But you're still not free. So yes, under illusion. So the basic themes of Afro worldview, European worldview: collectivism, spiritualism, community, complementary, and interdependence. There's 3 stages. You're dependent as a child, and you become independent, and you become interdependent. And we look at the stars, the moon, and the sun. They're interdependent with one another. That's cooperation, and cooperation is cooperation, that which you incorporate into your life, because adequate cooperation leads to proper communication, and that's how you effectively coordinate your power. Group commitment, as one brother would say, when we come together, we should come together and give each other constructive value. And I always say, operate as a social health engineer, to go against that which has been socially constructed against this collective spiritualism, community commitment, or interdependence, cooperation, Afrocentric approach. Shared responsibility, collective responsibility, accountability to group, community, and race. The Euro worldview, European worldview: individualism, materialism, separateness, independence, power and dominance, romantic love, pleasure, sex, accountability to self, immediate family. Basic functions: procreation, group survival, collective identity, self-definition, child rearing, socialization. Basic functions: Afrocentric approach. The non-Afrocentric approach: protection, security, defense, individual identity, self-definition, socialization, individual survival. Survival is really, we use the term, is really animalistic, because animals do survive. Humans just live. Because when we're dealing with slavery, we're dealing with what we call, say, self-preservation is the first law of nature. There's some truth to that. That is still animalistic. When you work, you work hard every day, and then you just what they call a paycheck away from being thrown out, or you lose your job. And you have to preserve. You have to become you're trying to fight not to be animalistic, but yet you are being reared that way. That's a dehumanization process, when you gotta think, man, if I don't do this, I don't do that, and therefore this is what's going to happen. You're being programmed that way. This is sad. It's really sad. And when it's sad, that's what they call a saddest. We're dealing with sad, and the saddest take pleasure, man, in inflicting injury and pain on you. And we talk about worldviews. We talking about a worldview. So, the objectives of this and of that, these worldviews: strong community, clan, race, community, organization, group, race, genetic survival, and we know about genetics, and oneness, harmony. If some say you're genetically recessive, then hey, you got to do that would benefit your survival. Huh? Oneness, harmony with nature, strong family, individuals, and I'm going back and forth with either, either or the European worldview and the African worldview, but the objectives, let's be clear, the objectives of the Afro worldview is strong communities, organization, group, race, genetic survival, oneness, harmony with nature. In the European worldview, strong family. Who don't want strong family? You know what I'm saying? Strong community, strong family. Strong community, strong family. Are they exchangeable? Inexchangeable? Would you want strong family, strong community? The family is the community. Within the community, individuals who enforce the importance of enforce the objective of having a strong family. So the family produces individuals to reinforce the importance of strong families. European worldview. Is something wrong with that? You think about it. Individual know his role, European worldview. Structure his life around knowing his or her role. Like a character that is in a play. Reinforced by laws. Reinforced by institutionalized, politics institutionalized that, the religious institutionalized, the family institutionalized that, the education, the area, the community in which they live, for individual genetic survival dominance over nature. European worldview. Control what? Nature. You control nature. I don't know how you can do it. You can alter one's character, but when you start getting into one's nature, that's diabolical. The objectives of African worldview. African worldview at window. Strong community. Is that happening? Or the clan, the race, objectives, community organization. We have adequate cooperation. We have a lot of organizations. What is their cooperation? The group, race, genetic survival. Both agree there is about genetic survival. What is influencing humanity, the humanity of people? That we would be at odds with one another. We say, okay, genetic survival, group race survival, Then it's talk about individual genetic survival. So what they're saying is everything is based, the European is based on the individual. It's about the individual. But the individual is the sum total of the whole. Oneness, harmony with nature, dominance over nature. The goal of happiness, which is to live in agreement with nature. Happiness depends on being self-sufficient and a master of mental attitude. Self-sufficiency is achieved by living a life of virtue. Virtue is the quality of being morally good. At first, virtue meant manliness. Who came up with this? Man means potential to me. Over or manliness or valor. But over time it settled into a sense of moral excellence. Virtue can also mean excellence in general. One of your virtues might be your generous willingness to help out your friends. So, in the words of brother Imam Muhammad Muhammad, he says that community life, the journey to community life, not in the words, but I'm paraphrase, the journey to community life is the journey to human excellence. Talk about virtue. So who is the greatest among you in rank, deeds, and actions? Is one by way of virtue. Until next time, Reverend Martin Kevin, teachers of teachers, preachers of preachers, may we continue to merge the gap and fill the void. Take what we can from one another and learn from one another. That we learn to continue to coexist with one another, not by any outside influences that is contrary to nature and our natural evolutionary process of development when it comes to our ability, and may we not kill our ability to live as humans and development of our intellect for the betterment of humanity. If not, we will continue to live as fools or perish as fools. That's why it's not good to put a fool in a position of power and people start thinking it's the model to follow. There are many who have came and brought about the message of Tawheed or unity, to coexist with one another. That which is prophecy, that which is prophetic, is a word that was written in the past, but it was telling you what's going to transpire for the benefit of the future. Look beyond your horizon, as I said before, that society is under social reconstruction. Reconstruct that which you are putting your focus on, your eye on, your evolutionary process of your human development, the intellect of your development of your intellect for the betterment of humanity. Whereas our feelings are becoming desensitized, we're becoming numb to the things we say, the things we do. And therefore, it renders us not to be people of integrity. So therefore, that which needs to be restored, and this is the understanding, and that is the restoration and the preservation of our human credibility. And under this social reconstruction, as our feelings are becoming desensitized, and that which we must restore our integrity, restore our credibility with integrity, is that the tolerance that we have, and the tolerance that we don't have, and we shouldn't have tolerance for foolishness. But yet many have tolerance for food. If your feelings are becoming desensitized, we have to develop a tolerance for foolishness. And therefore, the integrity as well as the dignity, we must readdress social diversity, give it a new address, a new home, because when inspiration comes down, one's aspiration goes up, moving from a persecuted minority to a privileged majority, with none have to worry about his next meal or his or her house or home being taken from him or her. That we will not be a threat to one another. That we come in peace without any hidden agendas, without seeking any notoriety, not influenced by fame, fortune, or wealth, living in a nature of harmony, oneness. Is stronger than conflict, and unity is stronger than diversity. None of this social reconstruct, construct, temperance / temperament, the Sirac, the bridge, the bone, the splitting of the atom, the protons, the neutrons, the electrons, the energy. Hadama, the earth has its appetite. We must control the appetite, the animal instincts that we have. That they look at us and say, what in the heck is happening to these so-called human beings? Gee whiz. So, but the temperance is the self-control. It's connected to the tolerance. It's connected to the understanding, to restore the credibility of the desensitization process, as well as the dehumanization. The desensitization process, and the demoralizing. Yes. And then the temperament is the attitude which is designed to replenish to readdress social coherency, to become more coherent. Yes. The dehumanization process, the desensitization process, the demoralizing process, the dehumanization process. Our thoughts are becoming demoralized. Our thoughts are becoming demoralized. I'm going back and forth with them, but it's thoughts demoralized. That's the second part of this social reconstruction. Our thoughts demoralized, and the third is our attitude is becoming dehumanized. Yes, and that makes us socially coherent, and our communication is becoming devitalized. That's the fourth of this reconstruction, which is designed to replenish social coherency. And then we have that. That's the confidence we need to. It is said that when one starts to gain his or her confidence, he becomes a threat to those who put him or her in a situation where he or she has lost his or her confidence. But we don't want to become a threat. But when you are at peace with one another, then we are no threat to one another. And the final of this social reconstruction, our feelings are becoming desensitized, our thoughts demoralized, our attitude dehumanized, our communication devitalized, and then our activity becomes destabilized. So we're dealing with a spirit of apathy. That the action that needs to be taken is not so much physical. We talk about open up with this pursuit of happiness in the Afrocentric worldview versus the European worldview, in the Afro versus non-Afrocentric models of African family in America. A new type of people is that the action must be taken. Is that we, when it comes to also this psychosocial dislocation and emotional displacement in our thinking, is that we be careful not to take things out on ourselves at the expense of being placed in a position to do so, because it becomes convenient to do it. What we say to ourselves, how we treat ourselves, the drug use, whatever it is that we're doing, we're taking it out on ourselves. And this goes beyond race. This goes beyond class. This goes beyond gender. This goes beyond economics. This goes beyond politics. This goes beyond education. It goes beyond. Because the ruling class, their job is not so much to free you, but their job is to open up their range of freedom of productivity. And they use their productivity, their resources. They use their resources to put you at odds with one another, while they are in cooperation with one another. In the intellectual class, they reinforce this thinking. They cover it up. While the elite sit back. And whatever it is that's going on, they still are being productive. Because they say they produce the mind that's in you by the manner and the way in which you behave. So I say, you gotta go to that. You gotta go to that politics, state capital. I don't care what you call it. You gotta go, man. You gotta go there. You know, this tricks, politics. So be careful. Stay strong. Keep your head up. May we continue to be the best of human beings, and not to become tricked and become enablers to each other, and not to be so damn obstinate. Until next time, talk to you.